Welcome, everyone, to yet another monthly webinar held by our team. Today, I have the pleasure of adding in James from our leasing team and Patrick from maintenance, because over the last handful of months, we've been asking a lot of owners what kind of questions they have that they feel like they benefit from a professional property manager. A lot of times these are kind of one-off questions, so it's a great opportunity to consolidate a lot of this information and knowledge into one working session, and the lesson from the pros that have years of experience knocking these things out and taking care of them for our existing owners, clients, and specifically in DC, suburban Maryland, and Northern Virginia. So, not all properties are created equal, but we're going to expand upon that and give you a little overview. I've got James Rice, we've been working together for well over 12 years, James. And you are currently heading over the all leasing efforts, as well as a lot of the lease renewals and extensions, because it's worth keeping an eye on what the market is doing at any given time. And I think conservative is a word in our vocabulary a lot these days. And also supports me with the business development and helping field calls from new owners that are looking to make this transition. We also have Patrick Sullivan, who has come on board and is spearheading our field operations. And so all of the maintenance that goes into the day-to-day oversight of the properties is also joining us, because most owners are asking about leasing efforts and what we need to do to get places occupied. And then, of course, what are we going to do to take care of them? Because retention is a big word. We want to keep those good tenants. And how do we keep good tenants? Well, we keep them happy. We take care of the maintenance and make sure that all is well from the compliance perspective. And so he's going to give his insight and be able to expand upon that. All of us have spent decades in these roles, and have experience managing thousands of properties in that time, and those processes. And so we're going to expand upon that shortly. Before I get into the first slide, I did want to let everybody know that you have the opportunity to post your own questions to our Q&A, and we'll leave a few minutes at the tail end to address those. But in the meantime, there's a handful that we've already loaded up so that everybody can get a couple things through. And is there anything before we jump into this that James, Patrick, that you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for having us. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have coming up.
Yeah, same. Welcome. Thank you for your
Awesome.
time.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for everybody that's joined. So let's set the stage, right? Property management matters. A lot of people are going to take the I can do it myself approach, but then I don't have that many owners. We don't have that many owners that don't have something else they're going to be doing. This almost becomes a secondary job for many. And in many times, they're just trying to figure out how to do it. So, guys, I'm just going to field up a couple of these. And I think the first few slides, we all have something that we contribute. So I'd like to just kind of do a round robin, throw your 2 cents in. But, why do some of the properties seem so easy to manage, and while others are constantly creating stress? So since James, you're probably more front end trying to figure out how we can get tenants in, and Patrick, you're going to be taking care of the maintenance and oversight after the tenants are in there. Why don't we just go in that dynamic, and I'll share my notes at the tail end after you guys have put your opinions out there. So James, what do you think? What do you see? Why do some properties become so much easier for you to lease up and get managed from the front end, while others are more challenging these days?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the old adage of real estate is location, 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 right? I mean, obviously, not every property is in the best location out there, but the ones that are, tend to rent easier. The other aspects of it is the property, is it in the best shape possible, right? And landlords that we like to work with, want to do a full turnover of the place to make it look as good as humanly possible. So if it's in a good location, it's got a good, it looks good, and it's priced well, that's what makes it easy, right? That's what I like about the landlords that we work with, are those that are willing to, heed our advice to getting the work done and getting it on the market at a rate that it's going to rent, sooner rather than later.
Nice. I love it. Patrick, what are you seeing on your side?
I'd say the age of properties. There's so much variability in the age.
True.
We got 100-year-old properties. I mean, we got properties that were built, 2 years ago. So there's, different materials being used over time. Different kind of heating and cooling systems, lots of retrofits. And, honestly, people are just individuals and they live in properties differently. So you got to navigate sometimes a fine line between what's subjective and what's, would be considered a housing code violation. So, navigating that with ease, when you have an expertise, when you can be subjective versus objective.
I like it. And I will say that one of the conversations I have with owners on the front end is making sure that you're prepared to turn and convert this property into an investment. It is a business. You have to invest in it. And the more that you do on the front end to prepare it for the tenants, the less you likely should have to deal with on the back end. And it's
True.
important because online is the first showing. Nobody's going to pound the pavement and come out and see these places if they don't like
Very
what they
true.
see online, coupled with the fact that if a tenant has to submit multiple maintenance requests in the first 90 days of their tenancy, they're less likely to renew. So keep in mind that that investment on the front end is critical. And so we'll jump into the next one. Big difference between how professionals handle their property and how the DIY, the landlords that are doing it themselves, might go about it. James, what are you seeing? Because I know you pick up a handful of properties where the owners have already tried marketing. Why don't
Yeah.
you expand upon that?
Exactly. I was just going to go there. I mean, the biggest thing that I see is exposure. I mean, for a property management company like EJF, we have the ability to market the property to over 130 different websites. Our reach is a lot higher than a lot of owners can do when they do it by themselves. Generally speaking, when I pick up a property or I'm talking with an owner that you pick up, Conrad, they usually have one listing out there, right? I mean, you got to hope and pray that that one listing is being shown on Zillow at the top. And normally it's not a premium service that they're using. So exposure is key. And that's something that property management companies can certainly help with getting their properties rented sooner rather than later.
Love it. And once they're in, what do you see, Patrick? How are you seeing some of these do-it-yourself landlords handling the maintenance side of things?
So you actually touched on it a minute ago when you said, running it like a business. A property owner, rightfully so, has an emotional attachment to their property typically, and I see it in the business
Sure.
end of it. So I'm able to help guide business decisions versus an owner that would probably make a more emotional decision because of their, sentimental attachment to it.
100%.
Good
And
point.
also having that deep stable of contractors and the processes in place to make sure that we're crossing T's, dotting I's with regularity, and avoiding those surprises and, oh crap, what do I do next kind of a scenario. Love it. Love it. All right. How about the biggest misconception you hear from new landlords about property management, specifically potentially hiring a company like us versus going at it on their own?
Yeah, this one, I mean, I feel like the biggest misconception I hear from landlords is, it comes from the cost of doing business, right? And well, I've heard management companies are very expensive and things of that nature. I mean, yes, of course there is an expense to it, but there's a reason for it. And in the long run, you're gonna run the property or the business at a profit. I think it had a higher chance or higher capabilities with using a property management company than doing it yourself. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception I hear, especially from DIY landlords.
Awesome. Patrick?
I'd echo what James says. That's when I encounter as well. It's usually cost and cost overruns.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess I think the biggest asset that we have, especially, myself, I've been building my vendor relationships for literally decades, for over 20 years. Some of these vendors I've been working with in DC for 15 years or longer. So it's a lot easier for me to pull favors from people. And, the biggest value anyone has on this planet is time. So we tend to save you a lot more time. And that's something that you just can't get back. I mean, we can't give you a discount on your time.
You guys are reading from my playbook. I got the too expensive, but this is many people's biggest assets. Why go cheap, right? I mean, it's important to be able to get these things done, and there's so many hidden costs that you may not relate to. So the ongoing vacancy versus a leasing fee, right? Why? Let's get that unit leased up, tenants in, paying their fees. And a lot of times we're able to get these places rented up much faster than the owners might be able to do it on their own. Yes, there's vendors that do cost, but if we get that fixed in a day and a half, that's the tenants are going to be a heck of a lot more happy than if it takes 2 weeks. So you got to play on that and the hidden cost of your time versus our fees. Your time is not deductible and you don't get that back, right? And so we really want to focus on that. And what's your time really worth? Fantastic. All right, next page. Great opening slide. Let's go into the next ones. What makes our approach, EJF's approach to property management from different from others?
Well, I obviously can't speak for other management companies, but our approach is to, especially from the front end of things with leasing and marketing the property, is our main focus is to try to get a highly qualified resident in there as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, we don't want to put some guy, off the street that we're not vetting, and we want to make sure that they are vetted properly. But I focus more on being, a little bit conservative in pricing because I want to cut down on vacancy as much as possible. Like we just touched on in the last slide, getting someone in there sooner rather than later, generating income is our main goal for our owners. We want them to be as profitable as possible. And in order for us to do that, we need to find residents as quickly as possible to move them in.
And I actually have worked for a couple property management companies in the last 20 years. I've worked.
Yeah, you got that on me.
Yeah, this is the third one for me in Washington, D.C. And I'd say what makes EJF's approach considerably different is all of the other property management companies that I worked for, they definitely wanted to take a proactive approach. And we would always meet on it, and we'd have a lot of designs and ideas on how to be more proactive and less reactive, but it was never really implemented well. And the one thing that I've noticed here at EJF is there's a very pointed effort for proactive maintenance to make sure that we're getting ahead of things before they become problems. Our biannual safety inspections, our HVAC preventative maintenance. Those are all things to, look and anticipate, higher cost in the future. I mean, as you know, when you live in your home, if you think about how many times you've gone to Home Depot throughout the year to do this little thing here and this little thing there, you probably are spending probably $2,000 to $3,000 a year just on things that you absolutely need. And I'm sure there's some subjective things in the middle. Now, when you put tenants in those spaces, I'm not going to say tenants are bad because they're not, but they tend to live in spaces a little differently. They're a little harder on them. They're a little rougher on them. They don't have the same, longevity. They're just, this breaks, I call somebody and they'll come fix it. So I think what's making us different right now is that trying to beat them to the punch. And so far, we're doing a pretty decent job of it. Obviously, it's still a work in the making, but it's actually being implemented, and I find it pleasantly surprising.
Yep. And we have systems for all of this. There's an increased level of professionalism, I'd like to add. And we certainly remain relationship focused. I mean, I've talked to both of you several times this week, but that's not unusual, right? Just to be able to make sure that all the trains are running on time and the collaboration, and it is a team-based management approach. So there's not just one person juggling everything, and a lot of other companies have that, and we switched to this on purpose because if one person gets a little overwhelmed, communication starts to break down. When communication breaks down, then that's where frustrations begin to grow. But we keep with the transparent reporting, the proactive maintenance, and that integrated communication. And we utilize the software is available almost to full functionality with them. Whereas a lot of other management companies may have the bells and whistles with their software, but only use a fraction of what's available. Perfect. How about this? Both owners and tenants happy. I mean, sometimes there's going to be conflicting approaches and opinions. It's kind of like getting two people's opinion on something and finding the truth someplace in between. What do you guys see for finding that happy medium with both owners and tenants alike?
Yeah. So especially on the front end, when I'm trying to rent properties, I know our responsibility is to the owner first and foremost, right? With our management agreement. But I think it's as critical to treat the tenant at the same wavelength, the potential tenant. So, on my side of things, I want to be as responsive to that person as possible. I want to get them answers to the application if they're approved as quickly as possible. If they are asking questions about the lease or next steps, get back to them, as quickly as possible. So I want to set that standard with them on the front end. Very similarly to how I treat owners as well, setting the expectation that if you need something, you're going to get it answered, and you are going to get a response on your issue or your question that you have. And I think ultimately that quick response time to tenants, to owners, especially on the front end of thing, sets relationships off on a good foot with our company.
Right.
Yeah, I like to use my experience being both an owner and having been a tenant in my life. And I remember dealing with the property management companies, and I remember some far better than others. And I remember the things that infuriated me and the things that I found very joyful when dealing with them. And I'd say as a tenant, the biggest thing that infuriated me is when you called someone and you got bounced around to a bunch of people that didn't know anything about what they were talking about. It sounded like you were just, being thrown into the ether somewhere. So to Conrad's point, working in that team-based approach, we're able to spread talent out. For example, I do consider myself an expert in my field. I've been doing it for a long time. I enjoy doing it. It's just my thing.
Yep.
We're able to spread that talent though, across like 6 or 7 people that way. And when you're looking at it from two different lenses, so as an owner, you look at it from the business standpoint. Does this make sense? Is it subjective? At the end of the day, we leave it up to you. It is your property. But sometimes the answer to the tenant is no, and that's okay. It's okay to tell the tenant no. What it's not okay to do is not communicate back and forth with them. And I've noticed in the past with other circumstances and other management companies that I've worked for, there would get to this, this tenant request where there wasn't any clear line whether the owner should be responsible. And it was just like, it just fell off a cliff, and then all of a sudden the tenant doesn't feel like they're getting their needs met. So wearing both hats and trying to see it from both lenses at any given time and any given perspective, that's how we keep them both happy.
Yep. So clear and timely communication is critical. And of course, that kind of plays towards general availability of the do-it-yourself landlords. But then also having escalation and resolution processes in place are really important, because a lot of stuff can be dealt with pretty quickly and timely without having to grow up the ranks. But at the same time, when you do have that thing, there's the team collaboration to be able to get them addressed and come up with some solutions. So you're never going to be 100% out of the equation, but we really do try to shield 90% of this so that we are looping you in when there are things that are getting a little more challenging that we need direction on. Fantastic. So I'll stay out of this one, but what kind of tools or systems you guys use to keep everything organized?
I mean, I don't want to give away specific, softwares, but what I'll say is that with a property management company of our size, from a marketing standpoint, we have the ability to market the place in one location for it to syndicate out pretty much everywhere. And then from a showing standpoint, we have a software that can create, automated showings where tenants can choose a time and the availability and schedule, fairly quickly. From an application screening standpoint, we obviously have our requirements that they need to meet, but with that, we have that in a software where we can properly vet people. So being organized and having these tools will allow for us to find highly qualified residents quickly using what we have.
Yeah, not to give it away for sure. We use a very robust property management software that leads the industry currently. They are
Yep.
one of the top brands, and that's what we use as our platform. We use one of the top communication tools for within our teams. We use Microsoft Teams. That we could probably throw out there. We're incorporating right now currently some AI tools. And I know people, they feel some kind of way one way or the other about artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence, it's the future, no matter what end of the spectrum you land on. So what we're doing right now is incorporating that into our property management software. And what we're able to do then is, give a little bit more boutique style property management within a very large portfolio, because we can update your property maintenance notes, for example. And if you have like specific vendors that you use, we populate all that information as we onboard your property, and the AI reads into this. It cuts down on mistakes. Sometimes when you have if you were managing more than 20 properties at one time, it's very easy to lose something like that. So with this AI tool that we're incorporating, we're noticing, a huge downtick in those tiny little mistakes like that. Thresholds, spending thresholds. We have, $500 threshold in the PMA, but some owners aren't comfortable with that. You'd like a $250 threshold. You'd like, specific vendor use for this. The AI reads all that. So we're very technology focused, especially when it comes to, forward thinking down the road. I'd say those are the biggest tools that we use. And then our brains, obviously, it's probably the best tool we have available to us is our brains. We got a lot of great minds. It's not just artificial intelligence. There's a lot of actual intelligence involved too.
Nice. All right. Loving it. All right. We're going to go through the next couple. We're doing well on time. It might run a little long, but what happens when the tenants stop paying rent? This is going to be more administrative and accounting, but at the same time, let me just chime in and give you guys the direction that we've been receiving from our attorneys, which is that even in this government shutdown, it's worth getting started on that. So we have a process in place where we're constantly monitoring payments, reminding the tenants of the rent due, making sure that they're paying within those first 5 days, the grace period, a little longer in Montgomery County. But, in the end of the day, when that grace period comes to an end, we want to make sure we assess and take action, charge late fees, and talk about whether or not it makes sense to, beyond our follow-up and text messages and emails and phone calls to figure out what's going on, determine if it makes sense to take action and file for non-payment. You ultimately want to be the first in line with those, and the courts are a little overwhelmed at times, so it makes sense to keep your opportunities open. You can always drop the case, and the small reasonable filing fees that the attorneys do charge, it makes sense to take that first action all the time, every time. Some owners do say, oh, well, they've never been late before, and maybe that is a fluke, but in the end of the day, if they do pay up, you're great, you move on. But if they don't, at least you've gotten that step started. Patrick, you can knock out these next two, since the recurring maintenance and the vendors and accountability are straight up your alley.
Yeah, so we actually have an escalation procedure for properties. If there's 3 or more work orders open at any given time, we consider that an escalation. It's not going to say that there's like some major, huge problem coming down the pipe, but we do consider that like it's worth talking about. Reoccurring maintenance issues, usually that's when I'll get involved with it. We don't try to let it get past twice. If we encounter the same issue more than once, we take a different approach to it. One thing I would use as an example are leaks. You'll have leaks in DC, and people for some reason will automatically assume it's the roof. And if you got a brick home, you need to be checking the mortar, your tuck pointing and all that as well. And, if you send the wrong vendor there to begin with, and you're already behind the 8 ball there. So, we say we sent a roofer out, and the roofer, he diagnoses the roof because he does see a problem up there, fixes it. The next rain, boom, we got the same problem, because the problem all along was the wall. Knowing those telltale signs, like going in and, looking up, and if, you don't see a water stain near the ceiling where the wall meets, question that. High turnover properties, if usually there's a reason behind it, in full disclosure, the reasons in DC are usually rodent related. In which case, if you have a rodent related issue, high turnover, multiple tenants have now left this property because of this issue, it's time for the owner, you, to meet me on the property, and we'll go over a more extensive approach to maybe just excluding whatever the issue is. But always, I'd say it's always an in-person meeting, best as possible, and we would leverage my experience. What's your process for making sure vendors are accountable and cost effective? Again, that goes back to the relationship building. I've cultivated some of these relationships for years. These guys are still giving us the best prices. We treat them well. We make sure to pay them promptly. We like to have priority. So anytime we vet these vendors, there's an initial conversation that happens with me. I ask them, very clearly, like, if we prioritize you 1, 2, or 3, where do we land at in your portfolio? So if they offer us priority, we give them priority. So like I said, I have a very extensive vendor pool, larger than most. I'd say a lot of the property managers that I've worked with the last couple of years, for a handy person, they might have 2. I got 9. For plumbers, they might have 3. I got 7. These are all people that I've worked with for a very long time. So, making sure that those relationships, again, cultivated, and you're constant contact with them. I think the worst thing that these companies do is they'll create this relationship, get the vendor set up, get them some work, and boom, they just let them go on autopilot. And then, we just hope for the best. I stay active with them. I still go out to lunch with them just to stay engaged with them. I think that's very important.
Great. And I mean, I can testify to that because, we had a heating problem yesterday. Contractor was there. Yes. Same day, knocked it out, back online. Right. They are accountable. They're doing a lot of work for us. And so when we say, hey, we need you here, they get there. All right. Well, then flip the script, James. These are going to all be up your alley, especially since these are probably things you've experienced this year alone, with the change of administration, the hybrid versus remote work, the push for office, federal security and security presence, and election. Fire away.
Yeah, I mean, the top 4 of these, the 4 out of the 5 are pretty all encompassing. I mean, I've been doing this since 2014, really, engrossed in the rental market as my main, focus and responsibility. There's only been really 2 markets that I've seen so much volatility. One would be, COVID coming in March, April of 2020. And this year, since, the inauguration in January, we've seen a market in DC that has been kind of on edge, I would say. There's been a lot of, push to move back into DC, work in DC, but then there's been cuts with the federal government, right? There has been, increased, security presence in DC. Obviously, if you look at poll numbers, a lot of the DC residents, in Northwest, they don't necessarily like that presence. And, a lot of this has had a factor on the rental market in DC. So, you know, it's one thing, you know, where we have seen people that want to move out and they want to move to different locations. You know, we have seen people that have lost their job and they need to, you know, either sell their property, and they need to move out. You know, so we have seen a lot of people that have, you know, needed to exit the area, from an owner standpoint, which has created this environment where, and I know we're not talking about sales right now, but it is important that we do. You know, it's created an influx of properties that have gone on the market for sale, in a market that is already saturated with properties on the market, especially condos. So what you're seeing is a lot of these owners that have not had the ability to sell their place, now they're coming back on the rental market, which is creating, you know, more accidental landlords, which is in turn creating a saturated rental market, which is driving down rental prices. So I hope you guys followed me there. It's a very, you know, circle of life situation right now. So, you know, for single family, you know, rentals, I've seen rental prices either flatline this year or have gone down a little bit. And it really depends on the neighborhood, specifically. But, you know, it's creating a situation where there's more supply and not as much demand for the properties that we're trying to rent. And I'll tie it in with what's going on with the government shutdown right now. I mean, September was one of the best leasing months I've seen. I mean, I think we collected about $80,000 or $85,000 in leasing fees. You know, we rented 20 or so more properties in a month. But ever since the government shutdown, the rental market has gone very quiet. So, you know, I understand that the federal government is not the only employer in town. I understand that there's more things out there. But it has turned into a very, very challenging start to Q4 of this year. And I have a feeling that that is going to continue, if this shutdown does continue. So I would anticipate more properties sitting longer, rents to go down, and more inventory coming on the market, since people are not going to be able to sell, as well. So I know that's a lot of doom and gloom, but you know, these things are cyclical. Hopefully things get better and things start, you know, popping off again like they were earlier this year, last year. So we'll see, but it's definitely a concerning time right now.
And of course, there's going to be a seasonality of the market, and so
Correct.
when we have this kind of lining up with the tail end of the year, where everybody's going to then start getting into holiday mode. We got Halloween just
True.
around the corner here. We need to be mindful of it, but you know, the government shutdown does have that impact on both owners and tenants alike. But all we need is one, right? All we need to do is
Yeah.
one person to start to say that this is the place for me and start paying the rent. And so we don't know where until we try. And even with the dips, statistics show we are still well ahead of the national average as far as rents are concerned. So,
Yep.
you know, be mindful of that, but also consider something, even if you got $10,000 last year when you tried doing this, you know, we're going to fall short, but at the same time, something is always better than nothing.
Yep.
So just work with us on it. A lot of times this time of the year, we also try to push for 16, 18-month leases to get through 2 winters. So don't be surprised if that's the conversation we have when we go through it. Now, so I already covered the part about the rent collection, the payments during the shutdown. Nothing changes. Our system is still in place and it still operates the same way as it would in any other times. And so the last couple of questions on this slide, I'm just going to go through real quick. I think that it's going to be a resounding yes from our team, but of course we're on this side of the table. But is it really worth paying property management, or can I just handle it myself? James, 2 cents, Patrick?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, just going back to my earlier point, especially in this tough rental market, you know, it is worth a property manager renting your unit from an exposure standpoint, unless you have the time and energy to manually list these places on 100 different websites yourself. I would highly recommend, using a manager, a property management company to rent out your properties.
That initial exposure and the knowledge and the adapting of times, because there is legislation that goes into place that you have to work around. Patrick?
Yep.
Same. I mean, I would encourage it. There's crazy people out there like me that actually enjoy doing it.
And keeping the trains running on time and tenants happy. I mean, you got to be in the position to make sure that these repairs are done quickly so that the tenants are not inconvenienced, because there is that level of expectation on their side of getting things done timely. Well, essentially yesterday, right? Like everybody wants it done yesterday. Cool. How about EJF making owners truly hands off? Now I know that we can never get them 100% out of the equation.
Yeah.
But with the proactive communication, what do you guys think is the appropriate percentage of work that we take off of their shoulders on any given contract?
Yeah, I mean, with our management agreement, we have language built in there that allows us to do things. It depends, right? I mean, it depends on the owner that we have. But ultimately, if an owner is like, look, I'm moving overseas, I'm going to Europe, I don't want to be bothered, we have the management contract, we have the processes in place that will allow us, to do, our job on your behalf. And ultimately, I know that's not the best fit for every single owner that we have. And like Patrick mentioned, we have processes where we can tweak things. But ultimately, our goal is to try to make your life as easy as possible, and to try to take off as much from your plate. And that is built into every single process that we have.
I mean, from my end, from the maintenance standpoint, I'd like to think that we're handling about somewhere between 90 and 95% of the process. The only thing that I'm really needing is approvals. So we'll go as far as to do all the dirt, the digging, we're your eyes, we're your ears, we're your mouth, we'll speak for you on your behalf. You don't really have to be there. And I'd say it's easy to say that when you just have day-to-day maintenance going on. When it becomes something really challenging, that's when you become a landlord. So when you can just pick up the phone and easily call somebody and the problem was just, straightforward and cut and dry, I can assure you I'm not employed because things are straightforward and cut and dry. Things get complicated and things get complicated fast. So making them hands off, the only thing I would ever generally need, again, is your approval and your direction. So we work at your direction, we get you all the information that you need, we present it to you, either in emails or video calls. I do a lot of video calls with owners. We get the decisions, we move forward with it, we follow up with you, give you pictures, let you know everything's done. And I mean, really at that point, the only thing you're doing is opening your computer, reading an email. If you were sending too long, let us know and we'll shorten the emails up for you.
And it's kind of pretty easy to be able to say, hey, here's the problem, but here are a few options and here's our recommendation. And it should be pretty easy to just quickly respond being like, yep, or well, what about this? But I don't really think there's that many scenarios where an owner might have that inherent knowledge where they're like, well, did you try this where we didn't already troubleshoot it? But you never know. And sometimes they just want to make sure, get that reassurance that we've already tried the cheap stuff before we go for the bigger ticket items, right? Now, from what you can expect from a property owner, if you partnered with us, I'm happy to go through all of the expectation steps, outline what we do and what the compensation looks like for having us employed on your behalf. The transitions are very well streamlined. I actually just had to talk to an owner today that was hoping to do a November 1 transition date, which is just too tight for us to be able to get their existing tenant transitioned over and up and running. But at the same time, if it's vacant, there is no lost time here. Best time is now. So reach out. I'll be happy to talk to you about what those services look like. I'm going to come back, and the what advice would you give someone managing their property right now is going to be my closing, but so that everybody's aware before we jump into the Q&A, if you're thinking about start getting more information about property management, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I know that there's a lot of inventory right now. I know owners that have been doing it themselves have found that the time is better spent doing other things. We're happy to have those consultations, see what you've got, to see the condition of the property, and talk about what that would look like. And so I've already sent out my scheduling link, so you can book 15, 20 minutes to talk about your situation. And at the same time, we will also follow up with that in our follow-up email. But I'll give you my contact information on the next slide as we go through and do the Q&A, so that you're able to reach out to me and talk about what it would look like to start to transition. So from a closing perspective, before we log off and tackle a couple of these questions that I've seen come through, what advice would you give someone managing their property on their own right now? James.
Hire us. uh, no, I mean, if you know, if you have the time and energy to take care of everything, I mean, my advice would be to learn as much as you can about landlord tenant law. In DC, it is very, very complicated. It is very, very tenant friendly. And I would just try to be as well versed with that as possible if you feel like you know, you have the ability to take that on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage looking into the basic business license process.
Oh, yes.
What's
We didn't even talk about that.
with bringing your unit to be compliant as a legal rental in Washington, D.C. Just take a look at that process in itself, and just know that we help offer to guide you through that as well.
Yeah, compliance is a big thing. That's one of the ones I wanted to touch on. So thanks for starting that conversation. But it's not just about the licensing. Even when owners do get their properties licensed, it's going to play the long game. It's the duration. I mean, a housing code violation that the tenant doesn't report is still a housing code violation, right? Ignorance is not bliss when it comes to managing properties. And so getting in and making sure that the unit is in good order is important. Doing the proactive work, caulking the tub before the downstairs neighbor complains about a leak in their ceiling. Sometimes those things aren't brought up, but it's critical. And so there are expectations there, and so those are things that I'd probably say are worth keeping on the radar, and making sure that you have the bandwidth and capacity to do it. But you have to give the tenants notice of your intention to enter. You have to make sure that you are following all of DC's expectations in terms of what it looks like from a landlord-tenant relationship. Right. Stuff we're well versed on, and we're making edits all the time, even with the new legislation about the pets and housing that went into effect October 15th, straight through to what this Mayor's Rental Act is going to have an impact once that's actually signed in and implemented. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you guys for joining me today and giving your insight and wealth of knowledge. You know, we work great as a team, and we meet regularly just to make sure that everything is running well. We have our escalation processes in place. And I saw 2 questions come in throughout this, and I'll just go through those real quick. James, first one's going to be in your line. What experience does our team have with the DCHA voucher program and tenants?
Oh, I have maybe too much experience with it. So this has been a hot topic of conversation over the course of the last few years, with more funding to it, and now we're seeing that funding might actually be cut back. I don't know exactly where that stands, but the voucher process in DC is very, very time consuming, and it is something that has been a topic of conversation for EJF. Obviously, we accept vouchers for all of our properties, like any other brokerage or property management company should do.
Or anybody for that matter.
or anybody, excuse me. Yes,
Yep.
let me say that. But it's time consuming. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork that's involved. You got to get the RFTA packet done. You got to get DC to inspect it. You probably will fail 1 or 2 times because they'll send 2 different inspectors by there and look for 2 different separate things. And
In
then
which
you
case my
will,
team comes in and helps because we're able
yeah,
to
exactly.
guide you through compliance. So all the
Right. And
compliance related repairs, James and I work really closely on that, giving you a, a quote for whatever those repairs are. We try to keep it minimal. We keep it targeted to what the and then we try to, build a relationship as best we can with those inspectors. So they give us a little
yeah,
bit of latitude when we're out there. And the more we do it, the more we're starting to know these people by their first name. So to answer the question, we all have quite a bit of experience in that.
yeah. And then just to tie a knot on that, once the inspection's done, then you get the lease signed, HAP contract signed. So, uh, I would say that for an average voucher lease up, it's taking about 60 days. I mean, 45 to 60, somewhere in between. When our normal lease up process, I'm usually getting someone to sign a lease within 48 hours. So that is the thing that is, no one has really found a clear cut way to expedite that because you have to rely on DC. And when you rely on DC, things take time. So
Fair enough. Yep, 45 to 60 days is an expectation. And of course, when any resident, there's going to be a period of time between application to acceptance, which we try to move really quick, but then from acceptance to move in, there's usually going to be a few week buffer.
and the
And then
other
the
thing
last,
is,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry. No, I was just going to say, I mean, DC passed some legislation that I think started in 2022, where from a vetting standpoint, voucher holders have different requirements than any other ordinary applicant. So that is another level of expertise that knowledge that you should have, is that when vetting vouchers, it's slightly different than vetting someone that does not have a voucher.
But everybody needs to know about all the protected traits in the district,
Yeah.
and source of income is certainly on that list, along with many others.
Yep.
All right. Last question is vacancies and rental prices year over year in Logan. I will say
It's
that
tough.
there's gonna still be an ebb and flow, but I would certainly say that the tried and true neighborhoods, the ones that are more recognized, tend to hold value more. So the DuPont, the Georgetown, the Capitol Hill, the West End, and I think Logan is probably going to stick in that as well.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but when I was talking about location, my ears perk up when I see a pickup from Conrad that's in Logan Circle or DuPont. Let's put it that way. I mean, those things usually rent quicker than in other neighborhoods. I mean, from a pricing standpoint, you know, rents in DC have really just kind of gone. It's like a wave over the course of the last 5 or 6 years with COVID, with other extenuating circumstances in DC. So, if I were to guess, I would say that Logan has done and gone up slightly more than other neighborhoods, but it's marginal. It's nothing extreme in from what I can see. So
Awesome. All right. Elise, were there any other questions posted?
Nope, that's all I can see for now.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, guys, for chiming in and giving me your insight and sharing it with everybody. If you hadn't noticed right here, we are giving a special promo, 2 months worth of free management services. If you sign up in the next 2 weeks, I'll extend that through the 15th of November. So don't hesitate to reach out, schedule a time with me, and I'm happy to talk to you about your property, specifically to give you some guidance on where things are and where we could help you improve. So thank you all, and until next time, appreciate it. Happy Halloween.
Thanks, guys. Happy Halloween.